Tyler Shough came through and was everything that I said that he wouldn't be. Isaac Brown finished 4th in the country and rush yards per carry, higher than Ashton Genty. That's incredible.
Louisville's offensive line pass protection rate, otherwise known as sack rate, improving from 93rd in the country in 2023 to 15th last season. You don't make that jump without a quarterback who can not take negative plays. So a huge part of his game that's underappreciated.
And we are back from the Pink Seats podcast, season in review, part 4. We roll along looking at the season that was for the 2024 Louisville football program. Jacob Lane, producer Keith, Vince Lococo, Matt McGavick. We are back all together tonight talking ball. Fellas, it's great to be here from the Pink Seats podcast. As I mentioned, subscribe anywhere that you get your podcast from. Make sure that you check out the show on YouTube if you haven't, so you can see these 3 other handsome gentlemen here on the show. And I'm excited to get into the episode tonight, breaking down the obviously the biggest group of positions we're going to get into tonight, the skill positions, specifically looking at the quarterbacks, running backs, tight ends, and linebackers. But before we do, Vince, I'm here for 2 hours of your breakdown on the Luka Doncic trade. What do we got?
As a LeBron fan, I just assume that we're winning it all now. So I'm just like, I'm full head of steam. Let's go. This is awesome. This is great. Don't really care. I thought it was hilarious how Jason Kidd got that. The press conference is gold. I wasn't seeing this coming out first, Jacob. This is awesome. I'm excited. I didn't know we were going to talk about this.
I didn't know where you'd go with that.
I am very excited about Luka being. I mean, he's only 20. He's literally my age, which is also
you're giving good basketball analysis on our podcast, right?
It's kind of demoralizing that he's my age as well, because Juan Soto's my age too. I mean, it's like these guys are all my age, making like hundreds of millions of dollars, and I'm over here working for a candy company.
The only NBA analysis I can give you: this is the amount of defense that's going to get played in LA.
That's fact.
Dude, how do you trade for AD though? Like, how do you even I don't care what
defense wins championships. According to
Anthony Davis really going to step up.
The orthopedics in Dallas just got super log jammed.
Right.
Man, well, you're not going to get much more basketball analysis anywhere else. We know that you came here specifically for that, so we can't beat that. But what we can do is we can start talking a little bit of football. And as I mentioned, guys, this was obviously going to be the biggest group of positions to look at. And when you include the quarterback position, arguably the most important. But when I just kind of talk about the skill position, what are the first things that kind of come to mind for you all in terms of the season? Keith, I'll just come to you first.
I mean, the improvement at quarterback play is the one thing that really jumps off the page. Like Tyler Shough, we heard all offseason, if he's healthy. And he came out and exceeded most people's expectations. Like, he was phenomenal. And just the jump in QB play alone probably saved at least 1 or 2 games on Louisville's schedule that would have likely gone the other way if we didn't have a QB of Shough's caliber.
Yeah. Matt, what do you think, man?
Pretty much the same thing he said. I mean, it's hard to talk about quarterback and not bring up the fact that, hey, last year's quarterback play wasn't that great.
No.
Sorry, it's just the fact. I'm just getting it out of the way now. We're just going to rip the Band-Aid off.
Setting that baseline, right? Baseline of average is here, 60.
Love it.
We're setting it right there very early on.
Uh-huh.
Vince, what do you think, man?
For me, I just, like you guys, Tyler was awesome in the improvements. It feels like it was really, we're looking at this position and all of us are probably like, yeah, it was a good year for these guys. And by the way, we're doing a big skill, which was the offensive line, defensive line, your skill, which is quarterbacks, running backs, tight ends, linebackers, tight ends, and fullbacks. And then your little skill will be the next one, which will be the DBs and stuff. So yeah, just in case anybody's confused on how all that grouping is that we've been doing. I feel like it's very heavily weighted by guys like Tyler, Isaac, Duke, Jamari. And then you're like, well, what else? Defense, who else, kind of deal. Everything else was kind of mid. So we'll see.
Yeah. There's a lot to get into when it comes to this group of positions here for me. Just the big storyline and kind of where it jumps off. Kind of the biggest, piece for Louisville in 2024 was the development of the running backs. And, of course, you can talk about quarterback because that was the huge storyline going into the season. You're going from one graduate transfer to the next. Obviously there was a kind of fall off of play at the quarterback position, really from mid to late part of the season in 2023. What was it going to be in 2024? But even bigger than that, when talking about this team, it was replacing 2 running backs that went into the NFL. That was one of the biggest topics that came up when talking about Louisville for really the whole offseason and then the first start, 4 or 5 games of the season this year. And for them to walk away with 2 freshmen really being the standout in this group, considering the money they spent at running back. Obviously, only one of those guys really played a role, and it was a minimal role at that. But the guys that we kind of thought would step forward really didn't, and the young guys got the opportunity. And Jeff Brom and Chris Barclay continue to find so much talent in that room, and I think that's really what kind of propelled this team, at least looking at the skill positions. And so tonight, guys, let's do this. Let's jump in to position grades, and we'll go through each of these, which will give us the opportunity to talk about them at length and kind of dive into some of the specifics. We've got some stats to kind of sprinkle in throughout the conversation. And then we'll give our MVPs out as kind of a group, just like we did in the first episode with the big skill on the offensive line and defensive line. Instead of giving an MVP by position where we're likely going to see a lot of repetitiveness, I think it's best to kind of group them where we can, all kind of go with our own directions. So let's just jump right into this and talk about position grades. And obviously, you guys mentioned it. The quarterback is the most important storyline. It's the most important player in terms of the, kind of blame and just the expectations of a season and game to game. And for Louisville with Tyler Shough, if you go back to when he committed, right? Like it took Jawar Jordan being like, "Hey guys, chill out. Like this dude is really good," right? Like Jawar Jordan was the voice of reason.
Trust me one last time, boys.
Right.
Trust me one last time.
On my way out, trust me one last time, right? I haven't failed you yet to this point, and he was right. Tyler Shough came through and was everything that I said that he wouldn't be. I called him a game manager in one of our episodes going into the season, and that was not fair for him. He proved to be a game changer. And I didn't expect that. I really didn't expect that. And so when you look at his season, just looking at some of the high level stats that I pulled here, specifically for him, you see where he stacked up not only for Louisville and how good he was for the Cards, but where he was nationally. I mean, you look at him passing yards per game, 14th in the country for almost 267 yards a game, 25th in yards per pass attempt. So we're not talking about the quarterback the year prior who is throwing dinks and dunks Daniel Jones style, right? We're talking about a gunslinger, a guy who's willing to move the ball in the intermediate and deep portions of the field and can really give you your offense that explosiveness. And the ability to make some of those incredibly contested throws that we saw this year and that we're obviously seeing and have seen in the Senior Bowl. Not dating this episode. You don't know when we recorded this episode. I didn't give you a timestamp like that last time. But Tyler Shough obviously was fantastic this year. Matt, you pulled some of the numbers by passing depth. I'm curious if you can kind of walk through that before we get into our position grades, because I think that was really interesting from this season and kind of where he thrived.
Yeah, so when it came to throws where he's like aiming at the receivers behind the line of scrimmage, like screens, dump offs, stuff like that, he was 42 of 51, which is an 82.4% for 266 and 1 touchdown. That wasn't really something that he did super often, was go down to his check down in the flat or someone who was, a little behind him, which if there were any criticisms of Shough, there were a couple situations where like he probably should have gone to check downs, but to his credit, whenever there were situations where he should have gone to a check down, he didn't typically put the ball in danger of being picked off somewhere or, having a negative play happen. It was just a minor complaint of mine. So for passes that traveled 0 to 9 yards past the line of scrimmage, he was 135 for 178, which is 75.8% completion rate for 1,322 yards and 10 touchdowns to 1 pick. So this is where he really made his hay when it came to the offense. He did have a tinge of game manager to him. Like he did put on display his arm strength at times throughout the season. I mean, multiple times throughout the season, but he wasn't afraid to really make the the safer throws and some of the shorter throws to keep the offense on schedule. And when he did do that, he was pretty efficient doing it. Now, stretching the ball out a little bit farther downfield on medium passes, which is 10 to 19 yards past the line of scrimmage, he was 44 of 65, which is 67.7% completion, which is pretty good for 744 yards, 5 touchdowns, and 2 picks. So basically, between the line of scrimmage and around 20-ish, for all intents and purposes, he had a completion rate of about 70% and threw for over 2,000 yards. When you're keeping the offense on schedule, of course, like the deep shots are the ones that make the highlights, but when it comes to moving the sticks and like keeping the offense on schedule and picking up chunk yardage, like not super chunk yardage, but chunk yardage into where like you get 10 plus yards at a time, he was able to consistently do that. And I think that was probably a big reason as to why the offense was able to have sustained success throughout the season, as opposed to how it kind of tapered off last year. Mm-hmm. And something that was a little bit surprising when looking at his splits by passing depth, when it came to throws that traveled 20 or more yards past the line of scrimmage, he was just 22 of 60, which I thought he would have a little bit of a better completion rate because it was only 36.7%. And he still threw for 859 yards and 7 touchdowns, but did come with 3 picks. But I mean, 7 touchdowns to 3 picks, that's still a positive ratio.
Yeah, I can think of 2 of those interceptions off of my head being like desperation heaves to end game, like the game against Notre Dame, I think was one. And then I think SMU was like an end of half.
I was going to say, I think he had one. Something. Yeah, going into a half. Yeah, you'll live with it.
Because I remember we not having a complaint about a real interception until I think the Boston College game. So that's pretty okay work.
Yeah. When it came to the deep shots, he put it in a place where either his guy could get it or no one can get it fairly regularly, which is, I mean, what you want. If you're going to take vertical shots downfield, I mean, yeah, you're going to have some added risk of turning the ball over on lurking safeties or corners who are trailing receivers. So if you're going to miss long so that no one can get it.
Yeah, I think that's fair. He did a great job taking care of the football overall. Vince, just quick thoughts on Tyler Shough before we get into position grades.
Oh, I thought it was nice this year just to have a guy that can actually run the entirety of the playbook, not having to force runs or feel like we're kind of handcuffed with what we can do throwing the ball downfield. Matt just mentioned that intermediate passing stat, which is just phenomenal. I mean, that's what you expect out of Tyler. It was nice to see. Like I said it with Ennis, that I think we got the best version of Tyler due to those injuries, and it really showed in a lot of the numbers that you look at in his play, and it's shown at the Senior Bowl. He's just a lot calmer in the pocket, a lot more self-aware, and just, I mean, God, his arm release, some of the angles that he would put his arm at, the sidearm stuff, I'm a sucker for that. I mean, that's like, it's like doing a backflip for me, Jacob.
Hey, same here, man. Right? Like every week you heard the commentators comment on arm angles, and it's almost like
you think he was a baseball player.
It's like you're seeing like in the basketball, like it's what Steph Curry has done with like shooting and being able to get a quick release and being able to shoot from anywhere. Like now, Patrick Mahomes and other quarterbacks, he's not the first to have done be a sidearm passer, but they are setting the way for that being like no longer frowned upon in the passing game, and instead being something that you praise a quarterback for when he makes an incredibly awkward sidearm throw, and you're like, I just think look at that arm angle.
I thought it was hilarious. The whole like first however many years of Mahomes' career, they're like, oh, baseball. It's all his dad in baseball. Shortstop baseball. It makes sense. It's like, no, that's normal. Go watch Matt Stafford play.
One of the aspects of Tyler Shough's game, while we're singing his praises, that doesn't get as much praise as it should. And I know we talked a little bit about it on the Big Skill episode, talking about the boys in the trenches, but his ability not to take negative plays. Like if pressure is given up, he's able to get rid of the ball. Thanks to our lead researcher and Big J journalist, Matt McGavick, he was able to pull that 9.3% pressure to sack percentage of 57 quarterbacks with at least 400 dropbacks. Shough pass to sacks percentage is 6th lowest in FBS last year, with I believe, second out of P4 quarterbacks, with only Avery Johnson having a 1/10 of a percentage point better sack avoidance rate. With his ability just to either check the ball down or throw the ball away or spike it at a receiver's feet, it led to Louisville's offensive line pass protection rate, otherwise known as sack rate, improving from 93rd in the country in 2023 to 15th last season. You don't make that jump without a quarterback who can not take negative plays. So a huge part of his game that's underappreciated.
Yeah, when you look at the numbers, Jack Plummer in 2023 had 32 sacks. He was sacked 32 times. You mean to tell me that the offensive line in 2023 was that much worse than in 2024?
No shot.
There's no way, right? So when
had to
looking
block
at
for
that
5
overall, that tells me that you had a quarterback who was able to get out of dodge, understood how to throw the ball away.
So-
I mean, go ahead.
So I'm going to call it a slight audible. So while we're talking about pressure to sack percentage, I decided to check something real quick because I was curious. Who wants to guess what Miller Moss's pressure to sack percentage was?
Ooh.
That's a good question.
Any guesses here? I just looked it up.
10.7. Or wait, no. Wait, yeah, the higher number worse, right?
Higher is worse, yes.
So I'll say 10.7 then.
But you
I'll
guys
go
have
with
a
the
guess?
over.
I don't know.
7.9.
Ooh,
That's nice.
all right.
Granted, it's on fewer dropbacks than Shough, but still, he had 374 dropbacks and was sacked just 7.9% of the time.
And didn't they have a really bad offensive line? Right?
Oh,
Like,
yeah,
isn't that a huge
terrible offensive line.
Yeah. So, interesting.
Keep that offense on schedule, baby.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, you saw massive improvements there, and so that
That's
leads
huge.
us right into
Like
to grades.
whenever,
Yeah.
whenever.
No,
like,
no, go ahead.
being able to stay on schedule as an offense, that's what you saw Satterfield run into a lot whenever he was coaching, was just the fact that the first down run wouldn't always work. And I
Nope.
mean, fans are smart enough to recognize when we're behind schedule. I mean, and we did not have to worry about that much this year with Tyler. And it was just a relief to go into every game knowing we have a good, competent quarterback. And not saying any of our guys weren't competent or anything prior to that, but it just was different.
Yeah.
It was just different
And-
having Tyler out there.
And to build on that Miller Moss stat, because, I like to look at some things too. Of the 79 quarterbacks with at least 350 dropbacks, Miller Moss's pressure to sack rate was third.
Nice.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
So, just something to look forward to.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's grade. What do we got, Vince? Starting with you, Professor Vincent.
Oh, I'm going to go with a D.
Yeah.
Wasn't it for me this year? What? No.
Pierce Clarkson grade? Sorry.
Yeah.
no,
I
I'm just
have
kidding.
I have an
Hey,
A.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
A 4.0 unweighted scale. Done. That was easy.
Yeah.
Easiest grade
Easy
of the easiest grade of the year. Thank God he stayed healthy. That's my biggest thing for this whole conversation. Thank God
Amazing.
this kid stayed healthy.
Amazing what happens when you don't run them 120 times. Looking at you, Texas Tech.
Yeah, right.
Matt, what
Not
do you
a
got?
running back.
You're the only one with a grade a little bit different than the rest of us. What do you got?
Yeah,
here?
I'm going with a B+, and that's
Oh, hard grading skill over here. What do we have to
Yeah.
do, Matt? A backflip to get was the throw against Notre Dame not A worthy enough for you?
a pirouette. No, it was. There were some instances, like I said earlier, how he did have a little bit of an issue with finding some of his running backs in the flats, but mainly this grade was because whenever there were opportunities for him to pick up a few chunk yards with his legs, I granted, I get it, he didn't want to get hurt, but he was extraordinarily reserved when it came to trying to pick up just like some of those like clear yards you can get from scrambling a little bit. And plus there were a couple plays here and there, like that fumble after that long run at Notre Dame. Like there were a couple plays where he wasn't perfect. Now granted, he was for the most part great, but that's primarily why I give him a B+.
By golly,
So,
quarterbacks aren't
Professor-
supposed to run the football.
We got Professor Bell Curve over here. Like, the average student will get a C in my class.
That was the guy that raised his hand and said, "Teacher, you forgot about the homework." And I'm sitting over here like, "Oh, god damn!"
Oh man. Go ahead, Keith.
Well, I was going to say, we'll bring the vibes back up. Now, I'm grading in accordance to college football quarterbacks. it's an A.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the only way you could have been better to get like an A+ is if you're setting passing records like a certain quarterback we played against. But like, when it comes to college football quarterbacks, mistakes are going to get made unless you have a generational talent on your team. As good as Tyler Shough was, he's not Andrew Luck. He's not John Elway. He's not that, but he's pretty damn good. So when it comes to college football QBs, A grade here. Fantastic. Gonna miss him.
Yeah, it was great. Definitely a big upgrade for Louisville. So when you look at expectations for what he was coming into the season, how he performed, what he meant to the team, I'm going with an A right there with you, Keith. You guys have really hit all the major points, so there's no reason to rehash that. But I do think that he's going to find himself in that one season. And I think you guys talked about this in the last episode, mentioned with some of the greats for Louisville quarterbacks because of the type of quarterback that he was in the season that he had. And with that, it's hard to grade anything less than that. So that wraps up the quarterback. So let's move into their backfield mates with the running backs. And for Louisville football this year, it was a little bit of a mixed bag comparative to expectations coming into the offseason with the additions of Penny Boone and then the subtraction of Penny Boone, then Donald Chaney coming in.
That was
from
so
Miami.
weird.
It's a very weird thing, right? Like the spring revolving door, I don't like it. I
mean, hand up, I was kind of nervous too when Penny left. Like,
Yeah.
I was like, oh, damn, like this dude was going to be a stud here. And proven wrong.
Yeah, well, and I think that it was addition by subtraction for Louisville football.
Mm-hmm.
Him leaving allowed for the emergence of others. Injuries early in the season against Austin Peay to both Donald Chaney and to Maurice Turner really allowed for more opportunity for Isaac Brown, a true freshman, and as well as Duke Watson. 2 blowouts early in the season allowed for Duke Watson to get on the field, and we saw very quickly, okay, this dude is legit. Like, Isaac Brown is good. We're seeing that drive to drive, but this Duke Watson guy who gets in when we're up a lot, like, let's get up a lot faster so we can get him in more, right?
Remind you guys of whenever Malik would get put in the game and he would just run all the way to, and you're like, oh wow, this is gonna be awesome.
Right, but in 2018 though, Vince, we were
okay.
I'm just saying.
We don't have to. Okay.
The running back
Italian noises.
But the running back position obviously comes out on the other side, a big net positive for Louisville. And you get two of the most talked about freshmen. You get arguably one of the most talked about freshmen in the country, and Isaac Brown, multiple awards that he's won. If I was a Big J journalist, I would have noted those on the show sheet, but I did not. So those awards were awards. I don't know their names, but he won those awards, was on those lists. So
he
was
had a freshman All-American.
Bingo. Yes, there you go. And so for Louisville, though, when you talk about all the names we mentioned, Keyjuan Brown, Donald Chaney, Mo Turner, it didn't go the way that you expected, but still, as I mentioned earlier in the show, when you're replacing 2 NFL caliber running backs, you found 2 more. So, like, we got to keep going back to that well, Chris Barclay and Jeff Braun. Like, going back to the well that's producing two running backs that are NFL caliber a year. That math adds up. I like that math.
I think it's the system. I think it's a system, Jacob. Like, honestly, like, this is known for being such a pass-heavy offense that defenses come in expecting a full, heavy pass game, that we're going to air raid it out. Whatever. I mean, I'm sure they run their percentages and everything, and we're probably 10% higher on a pass here and there, and it throws them off. But, I mean, in all reality, this is the perfect offense that you want to come into as a running back because, I mean, you are given every opportunity to take off and score touchdowns and gain your yards. It's proven with the 4 guys that we've had do it in the past 2 years.
It's wild to me that still hasn't been the scout for Louisville as of yet, like especially after last season. Like, people just, oh yeah, Jeff Brum, he doesn't run the ball, he does nothing but throw. We run the ball. I think it was 59% of our snaps last year.
Yeah.
And we come into this year, and while we shifted back to, I'm not going to necessarily say pass first, we shifted back to being a 50-50 team. Like, it's wild to me that that's not the scout, especially.
I mean, this is kind of an apples to oranges comparison, but I mean, that's like telling a team, hey, Steph Curry is going to shoot a lot of threes. You need to go in there and stop him.
Right.
I mean, I bet you I can stop Steph Curry from shooting. I undercut the shit out of his ass so he wouldn't get back up.
I was about to say, can you stop him without committing a flagrant?
Talking to the wrong podcast for that one. You can take that over to starting 502.
But like the thing about Isaac Brown is there's being a good freshman. Like that's not unheard of, right? Like every year there's probably 50 to 100, maybe 200, 300 really good freshmen in the country who stand out. They start, they develop into being very big contributors or key contributors for the team. But when I tell you that Isaac Brown finished 4th in the country and rush yards per carry, higher than Ashton Genty, that's incredible. That is a testament to 3 things. The offensive line, because I'm starting there because producer Keith is right to the left of me, and it's only fair that we start there. Secondly, a system that allows for freshmen to play, allows for freshmen to thrive, and allows for freshmen to continue to develop into stars. And then 3, obviously, the star power and skill that he has. I mean, this is a kid who is coming out of – this is why Matt says stop recruiting Louisville guys and prioritize Miami kids. Isaac Brown, right? Because kids in Miami, like kids in Kentucky ranked what Isaac Brown is ranked are not as good as Isaac Brown is.
That's
facts. That is facts.
Yeah.
I think you forgot out the fact that, Boise State was also just feeding Ashton Genty the ball 40 times a game.
8-man stack boxes.
Still, man.
I'm joking. I'm joking.
The beautiful thing about our backfield, too, is that we got a 2-headed monster, and we're giving Isaac all of the flowers, and he earned them. But Duke Watson, he was a friggin' dynamo. It seemed like every other time he touched the ball, he was busting out a huge play. So I did a little research of my own. He got 67 carries. Without looking at the show notes, if you have, then abstain from the answer. How many runs of over 20 yards do you think Duke had with only 67 carries?
40.
Way to play the game, Vince.
I'm not going to answer because I'm looking at the answer right now. Yeah.
I don't think it's 40.
It's not 40. We're not playing
40 rushes of at least 20 carries.
That would be incredible.
We're not playing
Heisman.
It's a fun podcast, right?
We're not playing CFB on freshmen, Vince. But
who does that?
In 67 carries, he had 8 rushes of over 20 yards.
Just a little bit
a little less.
That's still insane.
Right.
1 out of every 9 carries, he's taken a 5th of the field with him. That's crazy.
It's crazy because I think all of us can agree that Isaac Brown is the faster of the two and probably one of the fastest players on the team. Duke Watson is probably more explosive.
Yeah.
Not faster, but has the propensity for more explosive plays, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, he finished the season. I don't think he qualified. I don't know what the exact number and criteria are to be ranked, but he finished with 8.9 yards per carry on average this season. He had 7 touchdowns on 67 carries. I mean, that's incredible. In the NBA, we started there. I think it's a kind of great to kind of like trend back here. The per 40 stats, like that would make him the LeBron James of college football. Like that. I mean, those numbers are ridiculous. Like that is insane to score 7 times on 67 carries. And really, obviously he got involved early with the blowouts, but really he didn't really come back into play until week 5, 6, 7, and maybe even later than that when he really became the second back. I mean, it's like Gretchen Wieners and Mean Girls trying to make fetch happen. Jeff Brom just kept trying with Donald Chaney. Like it wasn't for lack of effort with Donald Chaney. True. He, you go back to was it Notre Dame, the pitch on 3rd or 4th down, I think, where he tried
that. Nail in the coffin right there for that one.
Yeah, right. He tried the outside pitch to Donald Chaney, and everyone in the stadium and at home said that ain't working. We all that guy gives you 1 yard. That's what his season average was just about. Like that's what he's gonna give you. Give him to him on the goal line, Jeff. Don't do the 4th and 3 pitch. Not a great move there.
I like. Both these guys were special this year, but I love their vision and how well they are able to read an offensive line, how well they hit a hole, how well they hit cutback lanes. Things like that are super important, but it's really on Coach Barco and how he teaches this offense. I mean, there are so many there have been previous running back coaches that just I mean, for whatever reason, likely they've never seen that. Colby Smith used to run behind the running back so he could see what the running back is actually seeing. So if you go back and watch any of the film from when Colby was coaching, you'll likely see him running behind Brandon Radcliffe so he can also see the play develop right in front of him.
That's pretty cool, man. I'm not gonna lie.
That's
That's dope. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's
That's
pretty
dope.
sick. So I imagine Coach is a lot like. I doubt he does that because that's a bit OD. I mean, it's cool, but that's a bit OD in my opinion for a coach. We have film for
That's what graduate assistants are for.
Exactly. We have film for a reason, but I know that Coach Barkley is just. I mean, he is somebody that you would run through a brick wall for, and I mean, the fact that he can get these freshmen to play so confidently within the offense is. I mean, he deserves more flowers than anyone.
Yeah, I totally agree. And when you look at the season, you know, we've mentioned obviously and talked about Isaac Brown, Duke Watson, but just quickly, Donald Chaney, you know, again, the injury early in the season with that high ankle sprain makes you wonder if potentially it could have gone a different way had that not happened. But he does provide you with a very reliable goal line back. Got scored 3 touchdowns this season. Go ahead, Keith.
We can go back to Chaney. I was just going to say I'm thrilled that we're keeping Keyjuan.
Yeah, and
we got that bona fide thumper in the backfield.
The change of pace back. I mean, this season, the thing that I really liked about Keyjuan Brown was when they would go, you know, Isaac Brown. The next drive they'd come back and they would give Keyjuan 3, 4, 5 carries, and each one of those was a positive carry. I mean, it was 6, 7, 8 yards. His season average was almost 5.5 yards per carry, but it felt like it was more than that because it ran through 2 dudes on the way to 5 yards.
Well, numbers will tell you that, like, you might as well be that third back in this offense. You'll play. Year one, Jawar was down for 1 game. Was it multiple games that Jawar was down for?
Yeah.
I mean, this one, Mo Turner and Donald Chaney get hurt. I mean, why not sign up to be that third back and maybe take a pay cut just to be in a better offense on a better football team and get more of an opportunity?
And plus, this season, I mean, they would start out. Isaac would get the first drive, then Duke would get the next drive, then Keyjuan would get kind of mixed in with that third drive with some of those other 2 guys kind of mixed in as well. Like, I mean, top 3 backs in this system, they get regular run. It's not just the starting running back is like the bell cow. I mean, I'm not really sure bell cow running back exists anymore except
right because but it can't, right? These running backs, like, as much as they want it to exist, it can't because the NFL doesn't want a running back that already has a load of carries and wear and tear, right? So what I think is really interesting though with this group is you had 4 guys with 45 plus carries. I mean, that's not for each of those other 3 outside of Isaac Brown, that's not a bad number. You'll live with that. You'd like more, of course, and Donald Chaney is probably the one that stands out as probably, in his mind, demanding more than what he got. But for the most part, they really divided the carries up. They gave everyone, an opportunity to participate, and they provided production. So it wasn't as a charity case. It was as if these guys all gave you something. Even Mo Turner. Late in the season when he came back from injury, they gave you something.
And a lot of these guys, I mean, you're wondering, like, you always say coming off the bench, they have to get in a rhythm, X, Y, and Z. Well, I mean, a lot of these guys just come in ready to rock and roll. I mean, legs are fresh. It's like they haven't even skipped a drive, which I think is cool to see on the strength staff side. What they're doing in the weight room is working. They're stretching. They're on the bikes. I mean, just the fact that these guys are ready, attentive, and excited to get in the game is another thing to look at.
Yeah.
And how spoiled are we? We have 3 running backs coming back.
I'm not spoiled at all. I'm a fucking Wolf fan. I've had to deal with so much.
In this aspect, like Keyjuan Brown had our lowest yards per carry of our returning running backs last year at 5.2 yards per carry. Looking at team rushing averages, 5.2 yards a carry would have him tied for 19th team-based rushing in the country.
Right.
It's just insane.
Yeah,
I think it says something that Boise State was ready to sign him after having Ashton Genty, who was top in the Heisman race. I mean, was the Heisman winner to some people, not me. Fed him too much, but that's a conversation for another day.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to the conversation of the collective and just the staff being aggressive, knowing what they want. We talked about this several weeks ago when he came back, but that's that's swallowing your pride and saying we need him on our team. Let's go out and we'll figure out the cost. Let's make it happen. And now for Louisville, they have those 3 backs plus I don't know his first name, but Wilder, the freshman running back who comes over from James Madison, while he does get more room to develop, I do think he could be a guy that early on in the season when you're playing some of those games, James Madison and Eastern Kentucky, that you can get him in there and get some snaps. And who knows, man? Maybe you have a third one of those guys on your team. Like, I mean, who knows at this point? Every running back that touches the field might just be a star. I don't know. At least freshman running back.
In this offense, you never know.
Never know.
I mean, it could definitely provide you the opportunity to hit a home run if you can find the right gap to run through.
Yeah. Okay, let's do grades here. And I will go first. I went last on that last one. And I think we all kind of followed the same model for the most part, but kind of like pre-Isaac Duke and then post-Isaac Duke. I think they're two really kind of graded differently, although Isaac played pretty quick. Yeah, right, exactly. But Isaac played pretty quickly, but really, if you kind of look at it the first couple of weeks, it wasn't trending as him being the guy. So in Jefferson County, they handed out, I know most people think D is the failing grade. In Jefferson County, it was a U. That was the failing grade. So I'm going to give them early on a U because you spent all that money on Penny Boone and Donald Chaney, and it didn't really work out.
Catholic schools was like that too for whatever
that's fine.
It's worth.
Okay. See, I'm not sure. But post, when you start trusting the guys that you have and not saying that the NIL guided who played, but when you start just saying we're going to put the best guy out there, that's an A+ because you got 2 stars. You got a superstar. I will stand by my take from early in this season. Isaac Brown, at this rate, his number will be up there with Lamar and Johnny Unitas. I'm telling you now, it will be. He is going to be one of the greatest running backs in program history. If he continues at this pace, obviously that's got to happen. But post, A+. They were fantastic. They are the reason Louisville won 9 games.
If his number is going, I'll go next. If his number is going up, wouldn't you say there's a running back before his that should go up first?
I don't know. Depends.
Wouldn't his number go up before Isaac's?
You would think that it would, but didn't he just have his number honored? Right? Wasn't it honored?
Yeah.
If his leg doesn't break in the first game of his last season, it probably does.
Yeah, because he's a Heisman Trophy winner, most likely.
He's going to have to be a winner. Yeah.
Isaac will be in New York before the end of his junior season. Okay. As long as Louisville wins at the rate that we think that they will.
I don't think that take is like outlandish at all, Jacob.
It might be.
I'm just no, I don't think it is. If stuff is trending the way it is, I don't think it is. I'm definitely going D pre-Isaac Duke. For me, I have A written down, but I'm going to go B+.
Okay. I like that.
Would love to see them do a little bit more in the passing game and these guys be effective in that realm. There's no reason. I just will never understand why running backs can't catch a football. For what it just doesn't compute in my head. So like if either one of these guys can go out there and split out wide and provide a different attack for Miller Moss next season, that would be awesome to see.
Yeah.
And I'm going with A- just because. Well, I say just because. I mean, A- is still a great grade, but like there was that time in the first 3 weeks of the season where Mo and Don, they were doing okay, maybe not super great. And then that's what kind of paved the way for Isaac, Duke, and Keyjuan to really run away with it.
Right. In the pre-Brown and Watson era, it was a C-. Like Jacob brings in the NIL angle, which is an interesting sort of way to look at it. But we weren't a terrible running team when it was Chaney, when it was Turner. Like we weren't awful, but it wasn't great. Once we had the freshman back there and then Keyjuan as the spell, like S rank, highest one you want to get, super A+, platinum record, whatever.
I didn't know what S was.
Phenomenal.
I'm not going to lie. Hand up, was looking at the show sheet. I'm like, I assume S is good, but
yes.
What is that, Chicago grade? Or you didn't go to high school in Chicago. You went in Georgetown. What is that, Georgetown grades?
Chicago grades.
I didn't go to high school in Georgetown.
Yeah, aren't you from O-Block, Keith?
Owen County. That's where you went to high school.
Yeah,
exactly.
No.
O-Block.
So, but and the one thing that we don't want to forget about is that they did a lot of this. Our O-line was good. I wouldn't say it was elite by any stretch when it comes to run blocking, and they went against some damn fine defenses as the year went on. Like we talked about what their run blocking grades were in the big skill episode. There wasn't anyone that was truly out of this world. Like they were making huge plays out of maybe one blocker, getting on a guy, getting his ass turned to the hole, and that's all you needed. Had the eyes to make the right cut. Like Vince talked about all year in the game notes, 3-way reads, making the right read every single time and turning them into explosive plays. These kids are dynamos, like phenomenal. I can't grade them high enough.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. Let's move on here. We go right into the next position group here on the offense, and that is the tight end / fullbacks. Got to make sure we throw that caveat in. We'll get into that here in just a moment. But for the
that's
tight
the
end
room,
group,
and that's the room Coach Petrino would shove us in. By the way, well, actually, it's split. It's split. I went some tight end with Coach Klonakis back in the day. Coach Owens, back when he was recruiting coordinator and had to get promoted, and then after that it was Colby. Colby's room was so fun, but I looked so. There's nothing dumber. I promise you all, there's nothing dumber than my ass out there doing running back drills.
Oh my God, I would pay money to see that.
There is no green grass on this earth where myself and Brandon Radcliffe should be doing the same drill. There's none.
I'd pay a lot of money for that.
So funny.
I thought under Bobby it was just the linebackers room. That's what the fullback room was called.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
Honestly, that is very fair. The tight end group is one that I think very much underachieved in my opinion. Now, were they given the opportunity to overachieve based off of what we saw in 2023? I think we thought that they would be based off of who they brought in Mark Redmond. Obviously, Jamari Johnson goes from being this heralded prized recruit to now being a guy who plays late in 23 in the bowl game, and then in spring gives you a ton of hope. Becomes a key member of this rotation. Don't forget in 23 also, Nate Kariski was really good for Louisville. They get really, really, really versatile tight end, H-back who could do a lot of things in the red zone and presented a really solid pass catching option. So they had guys to evolve. You thought Mark Redmond could come in and really be the guy, right? And Jamari Johnson, early in the season, he showed you some things. Mark Redmond showed you some things. Several
Jamari Johnson's open field blocking was some of the best open field blocking that at least I've ever seen. I mean, that shit was spectacular.
Yeah. I go back and I can think of I can't remember if it was Georgia Tech, maybe the game after, but he had an incredible block that led to a big Keyjuan Brown run. And he did that, and he caught several big third down conversions or 14, 15 yard catches. He gave you each game. I said early on, like, he's showing you flashes. And that was really kind of it for them. There was flashes, but there was never really anything more. It never became the Bryce Hopkins and Payne Durham connection that David Blau and Aiden O'Connell had at Purdue. And I don't know, guys, if that's ever going to come back in this Jeff Brom offense. I don't know if we'll ever see that. Maybe if they had gotten Ryan Clare, maybe that would have been a different story. But I don't know if we're ever going to see that dominant tight end position. And so for this year, for me at least, that's where it goes to, is they just didn't step into that, and I thought they would.
Now, it's a weird sort of thing because I feel like a lot of people had their expectations changed solely because, like, they saw how good Nate Kariski did in 2023 and then saw how aggressively we attack the portal. We get a Redmond, we get a Cummings, we get a Skinner. And all of a sudden they think whoever comes out at the top of that depth chart is going to be a rock star that we're going to be dumping the ball off to 8 to 10 times a game. And that's just not necessarily the scheme. Like, we haven't had to ask a guy to be that kind of rock star for us. I'm not going to say it'll never happen again in the future, because who knows with one of these kids. We got a Messman, we got a Hauser who's in the chambers still developing. We've still got Skinner growing and developing. We don't know what type of player those guys will become.
Right.
But, like, to me, it was, they as a unit, they did what they were supposed to do, but it, like the NIL conversation like you had with the running back room, was it really needed?
Yeah. I mean, great question.
It's though it seems like Jeff Brom offices now, it's operating a little bit differently here at Louisville than it had been at West Kentucky and Purdue, where the running back room wasn't really a huge focal point at those two spots, whereas here it has been. So yeah. I keep waiting for a tight end to break out and be like that maybe not sole tight end, but like the commanding tight end one, because that was a staple. I mean, you mentioned those names like Payne Durham, Bryce Hopkins, Tyler Higbee at WKU. It seemed like Jeff Brom offenses operated at their peak whenever there was a go-to tight end, where like if the receivers were locked up, if there wasn't a running back available on a dump off, you at least had all reliable to throw to. And maybe, like to Keith's point, maybe that's just not how they're scheming it up here at Louisville, because they're playing in the ACC versus the Big Ten, the Big Ten or Conference USA. Maybe they've made adjustments as a staff along the way, and this is just one of their adjustments.
Yeah, maybe less milk checks in the ACC than there is in the Big Ten, if you're following my drift, and less white middle linebackers in coverage. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I'm just drawing connections here. You do the math yourself. You're at this position nowadays, you have got to be able to run a route, and not just the hitch anymore, not just a curl or a drag, like a real effective option route where you can get open and catch the ball and get yardage. And even a lot of times you watch Kelsey, you watch all the rest of the tight, George Kittle, all the rest of the tight ends in the NFL, they're running these routes downfield. I mean, they are real passing threats, and we just haven't had that in a long time, probably since like Cole Hicatini, like a guy that could legitimately stand up as that number 3 wide receiver and be a mismatch nightmare to an outside linebacker or safety. And it's like, those guys are just hard to find. And why, waste your time with that whenever you can really use your outside weapons and stuff? And
right. See, one second. I really thought that Jamari Johnson had potential to be that guy. Maybe not.
I did too.
Because you bring in Mark Redmond, but for 2025, because obviously Redmond graduates, and you've seen plenty of flashes during his sophomore campaign, and you think after another year of training and conditioning, and then for his junior year he'll be able to have a true breakout year. So that's why, like, out of all the portal losses that Louisville has had up to this point, while there hasn't been that many like massive ones, the only other one I can think of is Jared Dawson. But the biggest portal loss to me is Jamari Johnson. I don't think it's particularly close.
You got to think like these tight ends, like how a defense is going to look at that. Like, if I have a legitimate route runner at that point man and like a bunch set, say it's a bunch set to the field and they're tighter splits, and that tight end's the point man. If it's Nate or somebody that's like 70% run blocking and his route running skills aren't really that great, opposed to where it's a guy like Jamari even that Matt was talking about next year, or a real route runner at the tight end position at that spot, you just have to play it in two completely different styles. I mean, you can match that up with an outside linebacker with the point man all day, but if it's a legitimate passing threat, you're talking about having to bring your corner in, you're talking about combo and stuff, you're talking about how are we going to work around these guys possibly switching and everything. So it sucks, for, in my opinion, not having it's like Marshawn was awesome at that stuff, but he just couldn't put his hand in the dirt.
So Vince, real quick, say wheel route runner 5 times fast.
Wheel route runner.
Oh man! Now,
a wheel route runner.
I can't even do it once.
A real route runner.
The one solace
I'm a real
that I do
boy.
Now, the one solace I'll take with regards to losing Johnson in the transfer portal, though, is you talk about like having that time to develop. Unfortunately, he just had 6 to 7 months of that time taken from him. Yeah. Like when you take an injury like he did, like you can't train. Shit, if anyone knows, it's Vince. Like you can't really train unless you just want to get a huge upper body. Like you can't work on your route tree. You can't really get in the dirt. You can't really do anything for an extended period of time. So we don't know if he's going to be that coming back. I mean, I don't have any ill will towards the kid, and we don't play Oregon in the next 3 years unless we make it to the playoffs. So I'm not rooting against him. I hope he comes back and does play well. Yeah. But you don't know if that's going to happen.
Right.
Yeah.
And yeah. We talked about this back when he did transfer, and you talk about the, salary cap like approach that a school like Louisville has to take, where you don't have the dollars to throw at everyone, right? You have to be meticulous. What? We're gonna make a basketball joke here. Insert basketball joke.
No. I was gonna say, you mean to tell me we don't
You
have
need a center here,
pissed off boosters who can start cutting checks when Michigan wins a national title?
Right. We need our own Dave Portnoy. We're coming
what do
here
you
and
need,
throw
Pat?
a
What do you need,
$3
Pat?
million check at a quarterback. Right, exactly. That's gonna be Vince when he sells his candy company and becomes Professor Vince and has billions of dollars.
Yeah,
to put
y'all will be
towards
like,
NIL,
why
right?
the fuck is football Jordan brand and basketball still at Adidas?
Lococo brand, right? But when you talk about that group in the salary cap, you can't necessarily spend money on everybody. So one, for Jamari, if you're not getting the opportunity that you want to be a pass catcher, I'm already going to look at the grass being greener somewhere else. And then two, if the NIL's not there, I'm going to double down on that. And I think for Louisville, you're fine with Nate Kariski being what Jamari Johnson was last year. It's not the same, right? But it will suffice and it will get you to where you need to go. I still think they'll go out and they'll be aggressive in the portal because I don't think that you can live right now with just Redmond and Skinner. And I know Dylan Messman is a guy that Keith is going to talk about. If you even mention the name Dylan, or you say tight end, I mean, we could be talking about like something completely unrelated. And did you say Dylan Messman? Like poking around the corner, right? Like, but I do think that they need
Or if you have a friend named Grant Hauser.
Right. You said Grant Hauser? That kid can block, man. But speaking of blocking, the last thing here on this group, if you lump in the H-back, that is a position that instantly takes this up a letter grade because Dwayne Martin was probably one of the most certified, you can run behind me and I'm going to take you wherever you want to go type of guys. They commented on numerous occasions this season on the broadcast of Dwayne Martin's ability to just set the tone with that first thump from a running back perspective. And when Louisville would go different formations, they could go I formation. They could put Dwayne Martin, on one side and put Duke Watson or Isaac Brown on the other. They had an old reliable blocker who was your sixth offensive lineman. We saw that in the film several times this season. And then when you combine the fact that this season, Jeff said, fuck it, we'll give the ball to the fullback. I don't care. 2 carries, 16 yards, and a touchdown. Yeah, you got to love it, right? The touchdown, incredible moment. And then on the receiving side, 2 receptions for 17 yards, including a massive 4th down completion. What game was that? Was that Clemson? To Dwayne Martin, I think it was late in the season. It was either Clemson. Remember. I think it was Clemson. I really do think so. But
we can go back to the show.
Big time 4th down pass conversion where I told you guys for so long, like you got to throw the ball to Dwayne at some point so a defense doesn't say he's not getting the ball. Right?
You and Isaac
yeah,
both.
right, exactly. We're the only 2 in Jeff's ear. And then you had the fake punt also with Dwayne Martin where he was able to scamper for however many yards. I think most of his rushing yards
his bread
came off
butter.
of that. Right. So
that's bread butter.
Just a great season for him. You talk about a guy that's willing to do whatever it takes to win. Dwayne Martin, just incredible. Vince, I'm going to give you the mic before we go to grades on this one.
It was you mentioned how he's able to set the tone, but it's more than that. It's his ability to not just run through somebody. A lot of times fullbacks or offensive linemen, anybody, receivers will just come a little too gun heavy and run past the guy, won't have their feet under control. They'll shoot their head across the wrong side. I mean, you didn't have to worry about any of that with Dwayne. I wouldn't be surprised if he's legitimately like a guy that gets a shot in the NFL to play fullback because, I mean, that is a position that, teams, in the playoffs have clearly had success with. Pat Richard, fullback. So,
yeah.
Kyle Juszczyk.
Yep.
Can he play defensive line? And he can be like, like Richard and the dude from, he was a linebacker.
Love DJ. I don't know if he's flexible enough for that. Nor do I think he really wants
high school.
That.
Yeah. Shout out Rock Hill, South Carolina. Okay, let's go into the grades here for the tight ends. I'm going to kick this one off, and I've got less forgiving grade than you all, and I went C+, and that is factoring in Dwayne Martin as most of that role. I think part of this is just expectations by myself. I don't know. I thought Mark Redmond was going to be like an NFL caliber tight end this year. Maybe we missed, and it should have been Tanner Cazzoli from Ball State instead of Mark
Tanner
Redmond.
Cazzoli.
Maybe, is that how you say his last name? I guessed on that.
No,
not
I said Fuzzoli like the restaurant.
Koizal. You put the I in the wrong place.
Whatever. Sounds more Italian. Better football player instantly. But I just don't think that these guys lived up to the expectations. Again, part of that is opportunity, and Mark Redmond was really good on third down. But when you combine that, the Jamari Johnson injury, just the fact that it was only 1 or 2 catches a game, Jaleel Skinner did nothing. Isaiah Cummings just didn't get onto the field much. As a senior, you would expect him to at least get some snaps. So for me, I don't think it was a great year for them. Let's just roll that back out next year and let's see where we go.
Yeah, I gave it a B-, just similar reasons. Oh my good Lord.
Enunciate it. There you go.
Will Route.
Called him Emmanuel.
I mean, I did. There were some games where Mark Redmond did have some clutch third down conversions. Nate Kariski had a couple really good games, but like by and large, I mean, I'm like I said earlier, I'm still waiting on for there to be a breakout tight end. And plus, when you actually dive into some of the PFF numbers, their blocking wasn't that great, except for Dwayne Martin.
Yeah,
it was just meh.
Way above a 60, I bet. 60's average, folks. Okay.
That was great. That was good.
Final grades. Have we all gone here around?
I'm riding Matt's back on this one. B-, okay. All the same reasons he said.
Just going with a B, just because I don't think we really ask the tight end room to do too much.
Yeah.
You can't really excel when we're not asking you to. Like, they did their job. They did what they were supposed to. They got their catches. I mean, Redmond had a couple sexy catches earlier in the year. Kariski had a couple nice catches as the year went on. You're not a feature position, and most of the time when they had an opportunity, they made the most out of it.
Yeah. I think that's fair. I love that. That's very optimistic of you, Keith.
That was the most optimistic thing
I've
ever heard Keith say.
Yeah, right?
New Year's resolution.
New
I'm
Year,
gonna be more
new
optimistic.
Keith. Let's go.
For our weekly listeners, they'll know this is a great transition into the position group where we're going to get the most optimism out of Keith. And that is the linebackers. And this is one, again, if you listen to the show throughout the year, I think that from a defensive standpoint, the secondary was obviously the most obvious issues on film. But when you start to really, to the naked eye when you're watching the game, but when you really start to dive into film and you look at the linebackers, that's where I think a lot of the issues start to kind of fall in place for this defense, particularly with some of the run issues, coverage, tackling, not great, coverage. Particularly in the 4 games of 1 possession losses. I think
and
that's
effort.
Where it really,
effort.
Yeah.
Effort. That's
that's
one
fair.
thing that's bothered me the most out of this position group is that all 4 of us could sit back and clearly watch the game and see the lack of effort sometimes from them. It wasn't every play, right. But as we say in the film room, it is blatantly obvious whenever you are not going full speed. And whenever we're sitting here, I mean, we're not, yes, we drink our beer and enjoy the game the first watch around, but the second, third time we watch the game,
we mean business.
We're watching the game. And it's if we can sit here and watch and see where guys are loafing, that stuff sticks out. And that goes for the DBs as well and D-line. It was there a lot, but out of this position group, in my opinion, the most.
Keith, let me jump in real quick just before you jump into that point. Let me just caveat Vince's point and just throw out 2 counter statistics. Now, for football watchers, this is not by all means the truth of the source of truth, but both of them, in terms of the 2 linebackers that played, TJ Quinn and Stanquan Clark, did lead the team in tackles. So I think that's worth noting. Now, they got the most opportunity based off how the system works. But I think it's worth noting that these 2 guys were very productive statistically. Stanquan Clark, the 2 interceptions in the Washington game showed you the opportunities that he had. But go ahead, Keith. I wanted to throw that out there.
So I was going to ask, just question for the room. Do we think the lack of depth at the linebacker position this year played a factor into that? Like TJ Capers was injured for part of the year.
Yeah.
Trent Carter was a true freshman. A lot of our other linebackers were we moved Antonio Watts out to play star.
Right. Dan Foster and Jariante Davis really provided you nothing in terms of depth and being really on the field. I mean, Dan Foster wasn't awful. But,
I think it's hard enough with the communication issues we were having on the football field that if you pull TJ Quinn, a guy that, yes, I'm ragging on their effort and everything, but I mean, the kid's a leader on the football team, regardless of how you want to cut it up. You pull one of the captains, we're already struggling with communication on defense. I think that might deflate the guys even more.
I do think depth did play. Yeah, no, it's hard doing it virtually. We need an in-person studio.
Dan,
I do think depth played a part, but I personally think it's more so of a not a reliance on the starter, but how do I want to put this? Basically, eloquently, yes. Basically, the same reason that Braum never pulled Jack Plummer. Like, he's gonna roll with his guys.
Yeah, that's fair. That's very fair.
So maybe this is me again doing that resolution optimism, but I feel like another year with Capers in the system, like he was challenged in spring ball, developed,
shut up, Matt,
and answered it. Another year, Trent Carter, true freshman in the system, learn it. Like we watched him play in spring ball. The kid's damn good.
Right.
And then we have Caleb Perry coming in from starting in game time reps at Tennessee. Those guys all developing and coming in. I feel like this is a position that we could really see bloom and improve going into next year.
I really hope that's the case. I really do. I'm not optimistic, but I do hope that that's the case.
If Mark Ivy's leading that room, I agree.
Guys, let's just one at a time here. We'll get there eventually.
Are you about to PTI us and give us like the
mute button?
Yeah, the mute buttons and shit.
Right, yeah. I'm calling my shot now. This season's freshman breakout is Caleb Matlow. Okay. I love that dude's tape.
Yeah,
I think he's physical. He plays fearless. He's a hard hitter. He's even with all that, he still plays like mostly fundamental football. I mean, get him in for
seeing him. I know exactly what play you're talking about, Matt, on his highlights where it's like a reverse that the team runs. He's playing where he's just slow plays it this way and then shoots it right back through where right back through where the center was staying. I mean, that's stuff that we haven't seen in this position.
His linebacker instincts are very far along.
You have to have instincts at this position and a willingness to pull the trigger a lot. That's what Monty Montgomery had best of anybody was he wasn't. Yeah, it got him bit in the ass a couple times, but he was never afraid to pull the trigger and shoot a gap and go and try and make a play. Yes. And both of these guys have got to step up and do that next year.
So circling back to the season, I think the big issue that we saw from week to week was effort you mentioned, but also run fits and just gap analysis. I think that was one area in 23 where there wasn't a big struggle, at least on tape, that popped out. Maybe folks feel a little bit differently, but for the most part, we talked about the emergence of TJ Quinn. We talked about the emergence of those linebackers being able to step up and be really important parts of the defense. And this season, while the statistics bared out that they were the leaders in tackles, I mean, they got washed out. I mean, just time and time again. I mean, it was TJ Quinn doing Notre Dame's dirty work for them. It was TJ Quinn, popping up in a game against Boston College in the first half, looking like me trying to play linebacker, right? Like just being completely out of place, totally misdiagnosing a play. And I think that was something that you would expect better out of your senior leader. And I do think Stanquan Clark pushed him and ultimately got better, but you mentioned there was a lack of development behind them, and really that's been an issue for the first two seasons with this team. We've not seen any of the transfers come in, really bear out and be statistically impactful. We've seen development. We've seen guys get better, right? But we've also seen guys take steps back. So for this group, they were good. They were not great. They certainly didn't win Louisville games. Now, Stanquan Clark in the Washington game, you could make the argument.
This group was beyond frustrating.
And they made a lot of head-scratching plays.
The wheel routes still are, because this is the last time we'll likely talk about it on the year.
Wheel route runner.
Yeah, a wheel route runner.
I'm sorry. It's
great. It's good. I need to print it on a T-shirt, I guess. We'll tell Adidas to run those right with your team basketball photos. That is so. But it bothered me, man, the fact that they can never get the wheel, specifically with Stanquan. I mean, both of them bother me equally, but like Stanquan, with the amount of athleticism that he has, under no circumstance should a tight end or a fullback or any of those guys in that position outrun him, especially whenever he's supposed to be having the angle. I mean, those are plays that they've got to hone in on this year.
That was the most infuriating thing about this linebacking core, because they showed you the good so many times as well, like Stanquan especially, like blowing guys up, forcing fumbles, or doing a phenomenal job staying in coverage, making a play, breaking on a ball. I think, what was it, the Jacksonville State game? He had the one-handed snag out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Like, I was sick. Like, and you see the potential that they have, and just you see some of the plays they make where bad eyes and are out of position when a quarterback scrambles, or get washed out downfield and doing an O-line's job for them. It's like, what they can be. And both of them are coming back, and with increased competition in the linebacker room, I hope that pressure makes diamonds.
And all that stuff that you're talking about, Keith, has to do with discipline. You have got to be disciplined with your eyes and your responsibility and trust. Oh, wow, that's not Maynard. That's my dog going crazy.
Yeah, scouts popping off. Yeah, okay.
Right.
Go ahead, Matt.
So building off of Keith's point, what from my point of view, what made the linebacking room frustrating was that they were very good in one regard and very mediocre to bad in another. When it came to stopping the run or containing the run, meeting guys at meeting ball carriers either at or behind the line of scrimmage, the linebacking core, whether it be TJ, Stanquan, well, either TJ or Antonio, like collectively as a unit, they were for the most part against running backs. Of course, we know how they fare about with quarterbacks, so that's a different story. When it came to containing running backs, they were really good. When it came to containing quarterbacks, whether that be them running or throwing in the middle of the field, that was routinely a weak spot of Louisville's defense. One of the talking points during the middle of the season, because I remember asking Ron English about this, was, routinely the middle of the field to that short to intermediate part where linebackers are sitting in coverage was routinely getting abused. And that unit just couldn't consistently play decent pass coverage.
It's a very frustrating season. We could go on about the coverage liabilities. I think part of that might have been scheme issues, like SMU. How many times did we see them bringing out a package with a tight end and a running back?
Right. Yep.
Not very often. Yep. It was 4 wide sets. And when you're running a defense like us, where you basically have 2 linebackers and then a glorified hybrid linebacker safety on the field, you're creating your own mismatches in coverage. Now, again, communication issues, that stems more from the top rather than the players doing it. It seems like we weren't able to match personnel packages very well, very often, and I'm not going to penalize the linebackers too much for that, but you do take a ding if you're a complete liability.
I never would have thought Keith would have been the most positive guy out of this entire position.
Right.
I never would have thought.
A+ on the positivity. Grades for the linebackers, I'm going to go C on this one. Just average. Just flat out average. This is about as average as it gets. C right on the dot.
Same for the same reasons.
I'm going D-. This room was frustrating for me. The wheel routes. Yeah. It bothers me. It still bothers me. You expect playing with guys like Keith Kelsey, Stacey Thomas, CJ Avery. We knocked CJ for what he was sometimes in the pass game, but was still a dog for 4 years for us on the football field. It's like, where will this linebacker group go from here? Those were all James Burgess, all these stud linebackers. And here we are scratching our head, wondering, how are these guys going to be performing next year? Are they going to be the weak spot of the defense, et cetera? So,
C- just because the pass coverage left plenty to be desired from the room. And while they were pretty solid in the run game, there were some holes there. But to make it positive, they got an A- in trying.
It's a good thing we don't grade football on trying. Well, we do great effort. We do great effort.
Exactly. Great effort. There you go. All right, final part of the show here. We're going to wrap it up with giving our MVP for the skill group, again, as Vince recapped so eloquently earlier, looking specifically at the quarterbacks, running backs, tight ends, and linebackers. So our MVP can come out of any of those position groups. So, Matt, we'll start with you first. Who do you got, man?
I feel like it'd be too cliche to go with Tyler Shough because, quarterbacks do get too much criticism. I will say that. But they also get too much credit. So you know what? Run the dang ball. I'm giving the MVP to Isaac Brown.
Cliche?
I
We're
love that.
gonna call Keith and I cliche.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's really funny that he jumped off. He's the first one, so he gets to throw that out there.
Yeah,
so
he's
that
like,
anybody who thinks Tyler Shough looks like an idiot after him. I'm gonna go with Isaac Brown too. Just I don't think. Yeah, to follow up. I'm gonna do that. Yeah,
ball knower.
Yeah, ball knower. That's it. No, you don't have this season without him. No matter how good Tyler Shough is, no matter how good or not good the defense and Ja'Cory Brooks and Ashton Gelati, whoever, Isaac Brown and his development, him being on this team saved this season from being a 6-7-5 win team. Honestly, I mean, if you don't have him, shit, I don't know what you do half the time. So Isaac Brown is the MVP of this group in my mind because it's cliche to pick the quarterback. Sorry, what were you guys going to say?
Go ahead, Keith.
No, I'll walk into it. You know why cliches exist? You folks know why cliches exist? Because a lot of the times they're accurate and they're relatable.
Thanks, Keith. Get him.
Steps on the field, made the plays, makes the throws that make you say, holy shit, we got a quarterback. When you have Tyler Shough stepping on that field,
let him cook.
You never feel like you're out of a game. He's the type of guy who made you believe every single time. When we're down 2 scores against Miami, we got Tyler Shough. We can get back in this. We can chuck this ball down the field and make some plays. So that's why the Tyler Shough is my MVP for the year. Just a phenomenal upgrade over someone that I'm not going to drag through the mud anymore.
I'm going to go with Chris Bell because it's cliche to go quarterbacks for it. No.
It's cliche to pick the wrong position group that we didn't even talk about. Love it. Absolutely. Look at the fullback.
I'm surprised you didn't go Dwayne Martin.
Vince. No. I mean, we have Tyler written down.
He'd be disappointed in you.
Yeah, I have Tyler written down.
Trophy.
You have to go Tyler. It's
right.
I mean, it was either Isaac or Tyler for all of us. So.
Well, look at that. Right. We split 50-50. I don't like I whatever.
Jamari was really good though. If we're talking offense as a whole, like Jamari would also be up there if we're talking entire offense.
Yeah. If you add him for the 13 games, I think it's a different story. But yeah, I do think that there's some truth to that. So, all right, that will wrap us up here on From the Pink Seats podcast. Been another great episode here in our 2024 season in review. We're not done. More interviews, more analysis coming. As we mentioned, we'll get into little skill breakdown. Everyone's favorite divas, wide receivers, and cornerbacks. We might argue who celebrates more for meaningless things. No, I'm kidding. But we'll break down some great play from the Louisville wide receivers and, some of the ups and downs of the defensive backs. We'll get into the same kind of format. And as I mentioned, more interviews from local media, players, all the like. So I'm excited to keep this thing moving right along. Subscribe to the show so you can see more of us laughing at each other. Hear Vince say wheel route runner 5 times on the show each week.
Wheel route runner.
You sound like my son. Can't pronounce any of his R's, so everything's got a W. So it's just wheel route runner.
I was born in Taylor County. You cannot hold that over my head.
Yeah, love that. All right, well, that'll do it. Make sure you subscribe to the show here on YouTube at The State of Lou. Follow us on Twitter at Pink Seats Pod at The State of Lou. Check out all the great work from Matt McGavick, and we will see you next week here on From the Pink Seats Podcast. Go Cards.